I need to tell you something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it, even 5 years later. My name is Father Tommaso Benedetti, and for 17 years I was what they called in the Vatican corridors an investigator of extraordinary phenomena. Sounds prestigious, doesn't it? Almost mystical. The truth was much uglier than that. I was a professional destroyer. My job was to hunt down false devotions, fake miracles, fraudulent saints, and tear them apart before they could deceive the faithful. And I was exceptional at it. I don't say that with pride anymore, but back then I wore it like a badge of honor. I had files, thick manila folders with evidence, testimonies, photographic proof of deception. 12 supposed saints exposed as frauds. 8 miracles proven to be stage performances, complete with hidden wires and paid actors. 3 entire shrines shut down, their doors locked, their false relics confiscated. I had a method, you see, a surgical approach to investigation that left no room for sentimentality or emotional manipulation. I would arrive at a location, usually some small town where hysteria had taken root, and I would begin the systematic dismantling. First, interview the witnesses separately, taking detailed notes, looking for the inconsistencies that always appeared when people were lying or misremembering or exaggerating. Then examine the financial records, because money was almost always the motivation behind these schemes. Follow the trail of donations, the sudden improvements in someone's lifestyle, the convenient timing of miraculous claims right when a family needed income. Then, the physical evidence, the supposedly miraculous objects, the incorruptible bodies that turned out to be wax, or carefully preserved corpses, using techniques known since the Renaissance. I had instruments, scientific equipment, cameras that could detect fakery invisible to the naked eye. My colleagues at the Vatican called me Il Chirurgo, the surgeon, because I cut away the diseased tissue of false piety with such precision. The faithful called me other things, less flattering things, when their favorite devotions were exposed. I didn't care. I slept perfectly well at night knowing I was protecting the church from embarrassment, protecting simple believers from exploitation. True faith, I believe then, and still believe now, requires true truth. Not comforting lies, not wishful thinking, not mass hysteria dressed up as divine intervention. Looking back now, I can see what I really was. I was a Pharisee, a religious professional so convinced of my own righteousness that I couldn't see the rot inside my own soul. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how Carlo Acutis destroyed me, and in destroying me, saved me. It was March 2019 when I received the summons. Cardinal Perfetto himself requested my presence in his office, which was unusual. Normally these assignments came through administrative channels, formal letters with ecclesiastical seals. But there I was, sitting in that ornate Vatican office with its Renaissance paintings and heavy wooden furniture, while the Cardinal explained what he needed. There was a phenomenon developing in Assisi, he told me. A teenage boy who had died in 2006, only 15 years old, was being venerated by growing numbers of faithful. Carlo Acutis, the Cardinal said, pronouncing the name carefully. The boy had supposedly lived a life of extraordinary holiness despite his youth. He had catalogued Eucharistic miracles from around the world, created websites about faith, was devoted to the Blessed Sacrament in ways unusual for someone his age. After his death from leukemia, his body was exhumed and found to be in an unusual state of preservation. Now it was displayed in a glass tomb in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore in Assisi, and pilgrims were coming from all over Italy, all over Europe, claiming miracles attributed to his intercession. The Cardinal watched me carefully as he laid out these details. A teenager who played video games being venerated as a saint, he said with a slight raise of his eyebrow. A modern youth with a computer who supposedly achieved sanctity. The body apparently incorrupt, though of course we know various techniques can create that appearance. Miracles being reported, though you know how people are. Father Tommaso, they see what they want to see. I smiled. I actually smiled, sitting there in that Vatican office. This was exactly the kind of case I specialized in. Modern religious hysteria, the desperate need to find holiness in our secular age leading people to latch onto anything, even a dead teenager. The incorrupt body would be preservation techniques, probably involving chemical treatment post-mortem, that the family conveniently forgot to mention. The miracles would be coincidences, misdiagnoses, natural remissions being attributed to supernatural intervention. The whole thing smelled of excellent marketing, the Catholic Church trying to appeal to young people by canonizing one of their own. I told the cardinal I would need 3 weeks, maybe 4 at most. I would go to Assisi, conduct my investigation with the usual thoroughness, and deliver my report. The cardinal nodded slowly, but there was something in his expression I didn't understand then, a kind of sadness or maybe concern. He told me to be thorough, but also to be open, to remember that God can work in ways that surprise us. I nodded respectfully, but inside I was thinking that I had heard that before, from people who wanted me to go easy on their favorite superstition. I wouldn't go easy. I never did. I prepared meticulously. My suitcase contained everything I would need: professional-grade cameras, including infrared and thermal imaging equipment, instruments for measuring temperature, humidity, and detecting chemical preservatives, notebooks for documenting testimonies, recording devices for interviews, files on similar cases of supposedly incorrupt bodies that had been exposed as frauds. I even packed a small toolkit, thinking I might need to take samples if I could get close enough to the body. The drive from Rome to Assisi took about 3 hours. I watched the countryside pass, the rolling hills of Umbria turning green with early spring. I had been to Assisi before, of course, investigating other phenomena. It's a city that attracts religious enthusiasm the way honey attracts flies. The spirit of St. Francis still hovers over those medieval streets, and people come looking for miracles, for signs, for anything to confirm that the supernatural is real and God is present. I arrived on a rainy April afternoon and checked into a small hotel away from the main tourist areas. I had learned early in my career not to stay anywhere too close to the phenomenon I was investigating. Distance maintained objectivity. I didn't want conversations with enthusiastic devotees contaminating my perspective before I had examined the evidence myself. The hotel room was simple, clean, anonymous. Room 14, 3rd floor, overlooking a quiet side street. I unpacked my equipment, organized my files, and prepared my investigation strategy. Standard protocol would be to start with witness interviews, looking for contradictions and inconsistencies. Then move to document examination, medical records of the supposed miracles, financial records of everyone involved. Finally, physical examination of the body itself if possible. Before I continue, I'm really curious, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you're finding value in this story, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep sharing these experiences with all of you. The first few days of investigation were frustrating in a way I hadn't expected. Usually by this point I had found something, some small crack in the facade that I could pry open. But with Carlo Acutis, everything was disturbingly coherent. I interviewed his mother, Antonia, a refined woman who spoke about her son with obvious love, but without the exaggeration or embellishment I usually encountered. She described him as a normal boy in many ways. He loved video games and computers. He had friends. He made jokes. He got frustrated when his gaming console didn't work properly. But there was also this other dimension to him, she explained. He would wake up early to attend daily mass before school. He had taught himself about Eucharistic miracles and created a website cataloging them because he wanted other young people to know about them. He was devoted to his guardian angel and to Mary. When he got sick, when the leukemia was diagnosed and the prognosis was clear, he had offered his suffering for the Pope and for the Church. I took notes, looking for the tells that indicated fabrication. But Antonia Acutis spoke with a simplicity and consistency that was hard to fake. She wasn't trying to convince me of anything, just describing what she had witnessed. When I asked about financial gain from the devotion, she seemed almost confused. They hadn't commercialized Carlo's memory, she said. They had donated his website to the diocese. They lived in the same apartment they had always lived in. Pilgrims came to pray at his tomb, yes, but the family received nothing from that. I interviewed priests who had known him, teachers from his school, friends from his childhood. Everyone told essentially the same story, with minor variations that actually made it more credible. Completely identical testimonies suggested coaching or fabrication. But these accounts had the messy authenticity of real memory. Carlo had been kind, but also had a temper sometimes. He was brilliant with computers, but struggled with certain subjects in school. He loved animals, especially dogs. He defended kids who were being bullied. He went to confession regularly and took it seriously. The medical records of the miracles attributed to his intercession were equally frustrating. I had access through my Vatican credentials to the documentation being prepared for his beatification cause. There were several cases, but 2 stood out as particularly difficult to explain naturally. A Brazilian boy with a congenital pancreatic disorder who was completely healed after his mother prayed at Carlo's tomb. The Italian woman with endometriosis so severe she was told she could never have children, who conceived and bore a healthy son after visiting Assisi and asking Carlo's intercession. I contacted the doctors involved in both cases. The Brazilian doctor was cautious but clear that he had no medical explanation for the complete regeneration of pancreatic function. The Italian gynecologist, a woman who identified herself as an atheist, told me frankly that she had been shocked when her patient became pregnant. The endometrial scarring had been extensive enough that conception should have been impossible. Natural remission, I wrote in my notes. Misdiagnosis, coincidence. These were the explanations I needed to explore further. But the documentation was thorough, the medical professionals credible, and my usual ability to find the flaw was failing me. Then there was the body itself. I had seen photographs, of course, but I needed to see it personally. The fifth day of my investigation, I visited the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore during public hours. The tomb was in a side chapel, a glass reliquary containing Carlo's body dressed in casual clothes, jeans, and a track jacket, as per his mother's wishes that he be presented as the normal teenager he had been. I stood among the pilgrims, maintaining my professional detachment while they prayed and wept and touched the glass. The body did appear remarkably preserved for 13 years post-mortem. The face was peaceful, the hands folded, but I had seen excellent preservation before, achieved through various techniques. Arterial injection of formaldehyde, environmental controls, even natural mummification in certain conditions. This proved nothing. What I needed was access after hours, without the crowd, where I could conduct proper examination. I used my Vatican credentials to arrange this, contacting the bishop's office and explaining that I needed to examine the relics for the official investigation. They granted permission, though I detected some reluctance. The rector of the basilica would let me in at 11 that night after closing, and I would have 2 hours alone. I spent the day preparing my equipment, charging batteries, calibrating instruments. I ate dinner alone in my hotel room, reviewing my notes, planning my examination strategy. I would start with thermal imaging to detect any heating or cooling systems that might be affecting preservation. Then close-up photography with various filters to look for cosmetic treatments or wax additions. If possible, I wanted to take a small sample from an inconspicuous area for chemical analysis. That evening, I walked through Assisi's dark streets toward the basilica. It was cold, the kind of damp April cold that settles into your bones. The medieval buildings loomed on either side, their stones ancient and weathered. I felt confident, professional, ready to solve this puzzle and write my report. The rector met me at a side entrance, an elderly priest who looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He handed me a key and told me to lock up when I finished. He would return at 1 in the morning to let me out. Then he left, and I was alone in that vast, dark space. I walked through the basilica, with only my flashlight, my footsteps echoing off stone and marble. The main altar was shrouded in shadow, the frescoes invisible in the darkness. I made my way to the side chapel where Carlo's tomb stood, still illuminated by perpetual candles that cast flickering light across the glass. I set down my equipment bag and unpacked methodically. Camera first, then the thermal imaging device, then my notebook and measuring tools. I was completely focused, completely professional. This was what I did. This was what I was good at. I knelt down in front of the tomb, not in prayer, you understand, but in the practical position I needed for optimal camera angles. And that's when I heard my own voice. It wasn't an echo. I know what echoes sound like in these stone churches. This was my voice, my exact voice, speaking words that made my blood turn to ice. The voice was coming from inside the tomb, from beneath or behind that marble I couldn't tell. But it was unmistakably my voice saying words I had spoken 3 weeks earlier in a confessional in Rome. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I have stolen 15,000 euros from the diocesan offering collection over the past 2 years. Small amounts, carefully taken so no one would notice. I used the money to maintain a secret apartment, a second life that no one suspects. I am an investigator of frauds while living in fraud myself." I stopped breathing. My hands, which had been steady and professional moments before, began to shake so violently that the camera nearly fell from my grip. That confession had been made in absolute sacramental secrecy. I had chosen a church I had never visited before, a priest I didn't know, a confessional with a screen where I couldn't be seen. I had been careful, so careful, because I needed to confess but couldn't risk anyone knowing who I was. There was no recording. Confession doesn't work that way. The seal of the sacrament is absolute. No priest would have violated it, no one could have known those words, but there was my voice, clear as if I was speaking in that moment, reciting my own shame back to me from inside a dead teenager's tomb. The voice stopped. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then another voice spoke, younger, male, with a serenity that somehow made it more terrifying. "Father Tommaso," the voice said, "you came here to destroy me. But the one who needs to be destroyed is the Pharisee living inside you. I am not your enemy. I am your mirror." I collapsed, literally fell forward, my hands hitting the cold marble floor, my professional equipment scattering around me. My mind was racing, trying to find rational explanations. Hallucination brought on by stress. Mental breakdown from years of pressure. Some kind of elaborate trick, though I couldn't imagine how. But even as I grasped for these explanations, I knew they didn't fit. This wasn't a breakdown. This was real. The voice, Carlo's voice, continued. "You want proof? Go to your hotel. Under the mattress in room 14 where you're staying, there's an envelope I placed there today. Inside is a receipt for the secret apartment on Via della Conciliazione that you rent under a false name. How did it get there?" I put it there. "Because you need to see that your secrets have no hiding place." I ran. I, who prided myself on rational investigation and professional composure, ran from that basilica like a terrified child. I left my equipment behind. I didn't lock the door. I just ran through the dark streets of Assisi with rain starting to fall, my breath coming in gasps, my mind unable to process what had just happened. The hotel seemed to take forever to reach, even though it was only a few blocks away. I fumbled with my room key, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit it in the lock. Finally, I got the door open, slammed it behind me, locked it. Then I stood there in the dark room, trying to convince myself that when I lifted that mattress, there would be nothing there. This was madness. This was impossible. But I had to look. I turned on the light, crossed to the bed, and lifted the mattress with hands that trembled so violently I could barely maintain my grip. The envelope was there, white, unmarked, lying exactly where the voice had said it would be. I picked it up with fingers that didn't feel like my own. Opened it. Inside was a photocopy of my rental contract for the apartment on Via della Conciliazione. My signature, my false name, Andrea Rossini. The address I had been so careful to keep secret. Every detail exact, perfect, impossible. I had made that rental agreement 2 years ago in Rome. The original was locked in a safe in my apartment in Vatican City. No one knew about that place except the rental agency and me. I had paid cash, used a false identity, been meticulous about keeping it separate from my official life. And yet, here was a copy of that contract, 230 kilometers from Rome, under the mattress of a hotel room I had booked under a pseudonym just 2 days before. I sat on the bed holding that paper, and for the first time in 20 years, I cried. Not the dignified tears of someone moved by beauty or sadness, but the desperate sobbing of someone whose entire reality has shattered. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I controlled, had just been revealed as an illusion. I don't know how long I sat there, hours maybe. At some point I realized I was whispering to the empty room. "Carlo," I said, "Carlo, what do you want from me?" The answer didn't come as a voice this time, but as a certainty that formed in my mind with absolute clarity. Stop hunting saints and become one. When dawn came, I hadn't slept. I had spent the night in a kind of vigil, sitting on that hotel bed, holding the evidence of my double life, feeling the foundations of my identity crumble. The man who had walked into Assisi 5 days ago, confident and professional, and convinced of his righteousness, was gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize, someone broken and terrified and strangely relieved. I showered, dressed, and walked back to the basilica. It was early. The morning mass had just ended. A few elderly women were still kneeling in prayer. My equipment was exactly where I had left it, scattered on the floor in front of Carlo's tomb. No one had taken it, no one had disturbed it. I gathered everything carefully, packed it away, then knelt in front of that glass reliquary. I prayed the rosary. I, who hadn't prayed the rosary since my seminary days, who had dismissed it as repetitive devotional practice for simple minds, knelt there among the old women and moved through the mysteries with fumbling fingers. I didn't know if I was praying correctly. I didn't know if I had the right to pray at all. But I prayed. Afterward, I went directly to the bishop's residence and requested an immediate appointment. The secretary tried to schedule something for later in the week, but I told her it was urgent, it concerned the investigation. Within an hour, I was sitting across from Bishop Domenico Sorrentino, a 70-year-old man with kind eyes and hands that showed a lifetime of manual work before his ordination. I confessed everything: my mission to destroy the Carlo Acutis phenomenon, my theft from the diocesan collections, my secret apartment and double life, the supernatural encounter at the tomb, the impossible evidence under my mattress. I held nothing back, expecting condemnation, scandal, immediate removal from ministry. Bishop Sorrentino listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat quietly for a long moment, his weathered hands folded on the desk between us. Then he said something I will never forget. "Father Tommaso," he told me, "Carlo Acutis exposes hypocrites not to condemn them, but to free them. The question now is what you will do with this freedom." I asked him what I should do. He said that was for me to decide, but that true repentance required action, not just words. I needed to make restitution, to change my life, to choose who I wanted to be, moving forward. I left his office and spent the next 3 days in Assisi putting my life in order. I contacted my bank in Rome and arranged to liquidate my savings account. It totaled just over 23,000 euros, more than enough to repay what I had stolen. I wrote a letter to the Cardinal Prefetto confessing my theft and enclosing a check for 15,000 euros to be returned to the diocese. I gave the remaining money to the bishop to distribute to the poor. I went to the rental agency in Rome and terminated my lease on the secret apartment. I packed up everything there, a shameful collection of expensive clothes and electronics and luxury items I had bought with stolen money. I donated it all to charity. Then I returned the keys and walked away from that false life. Finally, I submitted my resignation from the position of investigator of extraordinary phenomena. I wrote in my letter that I was not worthy to judge the sanctity of others when I lacked sanctity myself. I requested transfer to ordinary parish ministry. The simpler, the better. I no longer wanted titles or prestige or power. I wanted to be a priest again, if they would still allow me. My official report on Carlo Acutis was the shortest I had ever written. I recommended beatification without reservation. I stated that the phenomenon was authentic, the devotion was justified, and that the investigator had been investigated and found wanting, while the candidate for beatification had proven genuine. The Vatican's response surprised me. I had expected laicization, scandal, public shame. Instead, the Cardinal Prefetto wrote back with what I can only describe as mercy. He accepted my resignation from the investigative role. He accepted my restitution. And he assigned me to a parish in rural Umbria, a small village called Pietralunga, with a population of about 400 people. "You want to end your career investigating saints," the Cardinal wrote. "I am sending you to a place where you can learn to become one instead." Carlo Acutis was beatified on October 10, 2020. I watched the ceremony on a small television in my parish house in Pietralunga. I wasn't in St. Peter's Square with the thousands of pilgrims. I wasn't wearing my investigator credentials or sitting in a place of honor. I was anonymous in a crowd of 400 villagers in a mountain town most people have never heard of, crying tears of gratitude. That was 5 years ago. Let me tell you what my life looks like now. I wake up at 5:30 every morning and pray lauds in the small church that serves our village. Then I prepare for daily Mass, which usually has about 15 people in attendance, mostly elderly women who have been coming every day for decades. After Mass, I have breakfast in my small kitchen, usually bread and coffee, sometimes fruit from the trees that grow behind the church. My days are simple. I visit the sick, which in a village this size means I know everyone personally, know their families, know their stories. I help tend the church garden where we grow vegetables that get distributed to families who need them. I teach catechism to the handful of children preparing for First Communion. I hear confessions on Saturday afternoons, sitting in that wooden box while people tell me their sins, and I never, ever violate the seal of that sacrament or judge them for their struggles. I live in a small apartment attached to the church, 3 rooms that hold everything I own. There is no secret apartment, no double life, no stolen money hidden away. What you see is what there is. My salary is modest, and I don't need more. I eat simply, dress simply, live simply, and I have peace. The peace is the thing I didn't expect. When I was an investigator, I was successful, respected, feared even. But I was never at peace. There was always the next case, the next fraud to expose, the next performance to maintain. I had to be il chirurgo, cold and precise and unfeeling. I had to hide my own sins while prosecuting the sins of others. It was exhausting in a way I didn't recognize until it ended. Now I am just Father Tommaso, the village priest. People come to me with their problems, and I try to help. Sometimes that means prayer, sometimes practical assistance, sometimes just listening. I'm not very good at it yet, honestly. 17 years of professional skepticism left me with habits that are hard to break. But I'm learning. I still think about that night in the basilica. Not with fear anymore, but with gratitude. Carlo Acutis could have exposed me publicly, could have humiliated me before my superiors and colleagues. Instead, he exposed me privately, gave me the chance to repent and change before the consequences became catastrophic. He destroyed the fraud I was living so I could become the priest I was supposed to be. People sometimes ask me if I still believe in miracles. It's a strange question for a priest, but I understand why they ask. After years of debunking false miracles, do I believe in real ones? My answer is that I know miracles are real, because I am one. Not in the dramatic sense of physical healing or supernatural phenomena, though I experienced that too, but in the deeper sense of a corrupt heart being made clean, a hypocrite being transformed into something approaching honesty. That transformation didn't happen instantly. The night at the tomb broke me open, but the rebuilding has taken years and is still ongoing. I still struggle with pride, with the desire to be important and respected. I still catch myself judging others, falling into that investigator mentality where I'm looking for flaws and inconsistencies. But now I recognize it when it happens, and I can choose differently. I've learned things in Pietralunga that 17 years in the Vatican never taught me. I've learned that holiness isn't about being perfect or impressive. It's about being faithful in small things, showing up for daily Mass even when you don't feel like it, visiting the widow who complains about the same things every week, weeding the garden in the heat of summer, listening to confessions even when you hear the same sins repeated over and over. I've learned that the people I once dismissed as simple believers have wisdom I completely missed. Old Maria, who attends daily Mass and prays her rosary while doing housework, has a relationship with God that my theological education never gave me. Young Paolo, who struggles with reading but serves Mass with such devotion, understands something about service that I'm only beginning to grasp. And I've learned that God's mercy is more radical than I ever imagined. I stole money meant for the poor. I lived a double life while prosecuting others for their deceptions. I approached a genuine saint with the intention of destroying his reputation. And God's response wasn't condemnation but correction, not punishment but invitation to something better. Sometimes pilgrims pass through Pietralunga on their way to Assisi, about 40 kilometers from here. When they learn I'm a priest, they sometimes ask if I've been to Carlo's tomb, if I've experienced any miracles there. I tell them yes, I've been there, and yes, I experienced a miracle. Most of them assume I mean a healing or a vision, and I don't correct them. The full story isn't one I share casually, but if you're listening to this now, if you've stayed with me through this whole account, then I want to tell you the truth that Carlo Acutis taught me. We are all living frauds in one way or another. We all have secret apartments, hidden accounts, double lives. Maybe not literally like I did, but we all have parts of ourselves we keep carefully hidden while we present a different face to the world. Religious people are especially good at this, I've found. We can talk about faith and virtue and holiness while harboring resentment, pride, greed, lust. We can judge others for their failings while excusing our own. We can investigate everyone else's devotion while never examining our own hearts. Carlo Acutis sees through all of that. I don't mean that metaphorically or poetically, I mean it literally. A dead teenager in a glass tomb can see into the locked safes of your life and pull out the evidence you think no one knows about. He can speak from marble and stone, can place documents under mattresses in hotels, can expose what you've hidden even from yourself. But here's what I learned that I want you to understand. He doesn't do this to shame you or destroy you. He does it to free you. The truth, even terrible truth about yourself, is liberation. Living a lie is exhausting. Maintaining the facade, hiding the evidence, always afraid of being found out. When it all comes crashing down, when your secrets are exposed and your double life is revealed, there's a strange relief in it. I lost my prestigious position. I lost my reputation as the brilliant investigator. I lost my secret apartment and my stolen money and my false identity. And in losing all of that, I found myself. Or maybe more accurately, I found the person God meant me to be all along. Hey, quick pause here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment telling me your location. It's always amazing to see this community from all over the world. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Your support means everything and helps me continue telling stories that matter. If you're watching this and you're living in fraud, if you're a religious professional maintaining a double life, if you're judging others while hiding your own corruption, I want to tell you something important. You can wait for Carlo Acutis or God or circumstances to expose you, which will happen eventually because secrets never stay buried forever. Or you can expose yourself. You can choose repentance before you're forced into it. I didn't have that choice. Carlo didn't give me time to come clean on my own terms. He exposed me suddenly, dramatically, supernaturally, and I'm grateful for that, honestly, because I would never have done it myself. I would have kept going, kept stealing, kept lying, until it all collapsed in public scandal. Instead, I got private confrontation and the chance to make it right. But you might have that choice. You might be able to go to your bishop, your spiritual director, your confessor, and tell the truth before you're forced to. You might be able to return what you've stolen, end what needs to end, change what needs to change, while you still have some control over how it happens. I'm not going to lie to you and say it will be easy. It wasn't easy for me. Confessing to Bishop Sorrentino was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Liquidating my savings and returning the money felt like tearing out part of myself. Leaving my position as an investigator meant giving up my identity. Everything I thought made me valuable and important. But it was worth it. God, it was worth it. I sleep at night now. I can look at myself in the mirror. I can celebrate Mass without feeling like a fraud standing at the altar. I can hear confessions without being haunted by my own unconfessed sins. I can pray without the words feeling hollow. There's a small chapel in Pietralunga, just a simple stone building on the edge of the village where people have prayed for hundreds of years. I go there sometimes in the evening when my pastoral duties are done. I sit in the silence and I talk to Carlo. Not formal prayer, just conversation. I thank him for destroying me. I ask him to pray for the people in my village. I tell him about my struggles with pride and judgment and the ways I still fall short. I don't hear his voice anymore, not like I did that night in the basilica, but I feel something, a presence maybe, or just peace. The certainty that I'm on the right path now, even though it's a smaller, humbler path than the one I was on before. Last month, a young man came to see me. He's from the village, mid-20s, works in construction. He told me he's been stealing tools from job sites and selling them. Not much, he said, just little things here and there that no one misses. But it's been eating at him, keeping him awake at night, making him feel like a fraud. I listened to his confession and gave him absolution. Then I told him he needed to make restitution, to return what he could and pay back what he couldn't. He looked terrified, said he might lose his job, his reputation would be destroyed. I understood that fear so completely. I told him a story about a Vatican investigator who stole from the diocese and lived a double life. I told him about getting caught by a dead teenager who spoke from a tomb. I told him about losing everything and finding peace. When I finished, he was crying, and so was I. He made restitution the next week, lost his job like he feared. But then another contractor in the village, an old man who heard about what happened, hired him. Said he respected someone who had the courage to come clean. That young man comes to daily Mass now, sits in the front row, serves as an altar server sometimes. His face has changed. He looks lighter somehow. That's the work I do now. Not investigating saints, but helping ordinary people navigate their ordinary sins and find ordinary redemption. It's less dramatic than my old work, less prestigious, less impressive. But it's real in a way my investigative career never was. I think sometimes about the other investigators still working in the Vatican, examining phenomena, looking for frauds. I wonder if any of them are living the same double life I was. I pray for them, that they'll experience their own Carlo Acutis moment before it's too late, before the exposure becomes public scandal instead of private correction. The Church needs investigators, I still believe that. We do need people who can discern between authentic sanctity and pious fraud. But those investigators need to be saints themselves, or at least honestly pursuing sanctity. They can't be hypocrites like I was, living in sin while prosecuting the sins of others. I failed at that. Completely. Thoroughly failed. And in my failure, I found grace. 5 years later, my life is unrecognizable from what it was. I live in a village most people have never heard of, serving a congregation of 400 people, most of whom will never be famous or important. I have no prestige, no power, no secret apartment, no double life. I have 3 rooms attached to a church, a vegetable garden that needs weeding, a schedule of masses and confessions and pastoral visits, and I have peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't depend on maintaining a facade or hiding evidence or managing my reputation. The peace that comes from being known fully, even the ugly parts, and choosing to live in the light anyway. Carlo Acutis was beatified, as I said, in October 2020. His cause for canonization continues. People still come to his tomb in Assisi, still pray for miracles, still report healings and conversions and supernatural experiences. I'm not investigating any of that anymore. I'm not the one who determines if those claims are authentic. But I know this. Carlo is real. His sanctity is genuine, and his ability to see through our carefully constructed lies and expose the truth we're hiding is absolutely real. I have the evidence under my mattress. Well, I had it. I burned that rental contract in the garden behind my church, watching the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. Symbolic, maybe, but it felt important. The false name Andrea Rossini going up in smoke, leaving just Tommaso Benedetti, priest and sinner, trying to figure out how to live honestly. If you take anything from my story, take this. Living honestly is harder than living in fraud, at least at first. The exposure is painful. The consequences are real. Losing what you've built through deception, facing what you've done, making restitution, these things hurt. But living in fraud is harder in the long run. The constant vigilance, the fear of exposure, the exhaustion of maintaining the lie, these things destroy you slowly, and the fraud always gets exposed eventually. Always. Whether by Carlo Acutis speaking from a tomb or by more mundane means, the truth comes out. You can wait for that forced exposure, or you can choose confession now. You can keep investigating everyone else's holiness while hiding your own corruption, or you can admit you're the fraud and ask for help. You can maintain your prestigious position and your secret apartment, or you can give them up and find peace. I know which choice I'd make now if I had it to do over. I'd walk into Bishop Sorrentino's office the day I arrived in Assisi and confess everything before Carlo had to speak from his tomb. But I didn't have that courage then. I needed the supernatural intervention, the impossible evidence, the complete shattering of my false identity. Maybe you're braver than I was. Maybe you can choose repentance without being forced into it. If so, do it. Don't wait. The longer you wait, the harder it gets, the more complex the lies become, the deeper the hole you dig. And if you can't do it on your own, if you need Carlo Acutis to speak from his tomb and plant evidence under your mattress, then I guess that will happen too. God will do what's necessary to free you from your fraud. It won't be comfortable, it definitely won't be professional or dignified, but it will be mercy. I visit Assisi occasionally now, not often, maybe once a year. I go to Carlo's tomb, and I kneel there among the pilgrims and I pray. I thank him for destroying Father Tommaso Benedetti the investigator so that Father Tommaso Benedetti the priest could exist. I ask him to keep working on me, to keep exposing the areas where I'm still fraudulent, still hypocritical, still pretending. And I pray for other investigators, other religious professionals, other people living double lives. I pray that they'll be exposed before the exposure destroys them completely, that they'll experience the terror and relief of having their secrets dragged into the light, that they'll discover what I discovered, that being fully known is terrifying and liberating at the same time. The villagers in Pietralunga don't know my story, most of them. They know I used to work in the Vatican, they know I requested transfer to parish ministry, but they don't know about the theft or the secret apartment or the supernatural encounter. Maybe I should tell them. Maybe I will someday. For now, I'm just their priest, the man who celebrates their masses and visits their sick and tends their garden. But you know now. You've heard the whole story, from the confident investigator arriving in Assisi to the broken priest kneeling in a village chapel. You've heard about Carlo speaking from his tomb, about impossible evidence under hotel mattresses, about 17 years of professional fraud being exposed in a single night. So what will you do with this story? Will you hear it as entertainment, an interesting tale of supernatural phenomena? Or will you hear it as a warning, an invitation, a possibility? Because if you're living in fraud, if you're maintaining a double life, if you're investigating everyone else while hiding your own sins, Carlo Acutis sees you. A dead teenager in a glass tomb in Assisi can see into your locked safes and your secret apartments and your hidden accounts, and he will expose you, not to condemn you, but to free you. I was the investigator sent to destroy him. Instead, he destroyed me, and in destroying me, he saved me. The fraud was exposed so the truth could emerge. The false identity was shattered so the real person could be born. The prestigious career ended so the humble ministry could begin. That's the only miracle that really matters in the end. Not incorrupt bodies or supernatural voices or impossible evidence. The miracle that matters is a corrupt heart being made clean, a hypocrite becoming honest, a fraud becoming authentic. Carlo Acutis specializes in that kind of miracle. I am living proof. 5 years clean, 5 years honest, 5 years at peace. A former investigator now investigating only his own soul, finding plenty of work there to keep him busy. A former fraud now trying, day by day, mass by mass, confession by confession, to live in truth. It's not a dramatic life anymore. It's not impressive or prestigious, but it's real. And after 17 years of fraud, real is exactly what I needed, what I still need, what I'll always need. So thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with me through this whole long story. I hope it helps somehow. I hope if you're living in fraud, you'll find the courage to stop before you're forced to. And if you can't find that courage, I hope you'll encounter your own Carlo Acutis moment, terrifying and merciful at the same time. Either way, the fraud will end. The only question is whether it ends in private repentance or public scandal. Choose wisely. Choose honestly. Choose life. God bless you wherever you are, whatever secrets you're hiding. Carlo Acutis is praying for you, and so am I.